Hey guys, this is a patch I just made in Beatmaker 3. And this is what it sounds like if we play it with chord polypad. Stick around, I'm going to show you how I made it.
Electronisounds Audio, the YouTube channel for you.
Okay guys, so first things first, you're going to need yourself some single cycle oscillator samples to play with. Now you may already have some of these on your iPad, but if you don't, you can go to my website, Electronisounds.com. You can click on the freebies tab, and I'm giving away a pack of 100 single cycle oscillator waveforms here. These will work with Beatmaker 3 as well as Chord Gadget. And we're going to go ahead and click here to download. You'll need to have Dropbox installed on your iPad for this to work. And what we're going to do here is click the three dots in the corner. Hold on, sorry about that. Let's try Open in App. Yeah, this looks better. Uh-oh, Dropbox is doing some housekeeping. Okay, cool, right? So now we're going to click on these three dots in the corner. We're going to click Export. We're going to click Open in. The iPad's being a little slow. We'll try that again. Export. Open in. Okay, fantastic. And we're going to do copy to Beatmaker 3. Okay, unzipped content available in the imports directory. You see what it's doing, it's unzipping here. Okay, so now if we go to our imports directory, we'll see that we have a folder of Dean's single cycles. And if we click that, it's full of these tiny little single cycle oscillators. And what we can do is we can drag these onto the browser, and we can change the sample loop mode from no loop to loop forward. And then in the mapping tab, we can adjust the root key on these and get them in melodic key with other patches. And what we'll do is we'll create a new bank here. Close that out. And we'll load another bank that we'll just use to I know this bank is in tune per se. So this is maybe, what is that, like an F then? Yeah, that sounds about right. So let's see, put that back into keys mode. So basically, I'm just using this other bank that we know is that I know is in tune to get this single cycle in tune. Turns out the root key on that one was an F. You could, depending on what octave you wanted to play at, you could change that to like an F2. Whoops. Come on. Then now you've got, control over it, the octaves via your MIDI controller. Okay, so that's how you can download the single cycles. That's how you can load them into Beatmaker 3, and that's how you can, make sure that they're melodically in pitch. Appropriately. What we can do now for today's experiment is we're going to clear this out, clear the pad, and I'd like to just start loading up a single cycle saw waveform. Go back to the sampler page here. In fact, maybe we'll load this size sample 01. That looks pretty nice. We'll change this from not loop to loop forward. And let's see here. If I put this in keys mode, and if we go to the mapping page, a lot of my single cycles are tuned to F. Okay, and we can see that this one is in fact tuned to F as well. So in the mapping page, if we just change the root key to an F, now we're melodically in key. Let's make that this one instead. Maybe the 0, I think, rather. Fantastic. But this is, pretty standard, pretty straightforward, boring sound. It's not really doing anything. I mean, obviously, we could put some reverb and some delay on that, but it's still, just a pretty plain sound. So what I thought we'd do, guys, is start trying to, layer up a bunch of these single cycle oscillators and make a little bit more of a robust and interesting patch here. Let's check it out. Okay, so I'd like to note that this is an experiment at this time, and I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, so it should be a little bit interesting. What we're going to do is we're going to load a whole bunch of these exact same single cycles, size sample 01. We're going to load those into some different layers and do some different modulations on each of those individual layers and try to make a thicker and more robust sound here. But I still want to have access to some macros inside of the sound so that we can, tweak this in real time. So let's get started. First thing is on the very first sample we dragged in. Let's double click the volume, double click macro controls, and let's assign the volume of this patch to macro 8. That's just something that I like to get in the habit of doing with all my sounds so that, we'll turn the max to 0 here. And now we just have sort of like a default, built-in volume knob. And we'll do that. We'll do all, any of these modulations. We'll make sure that we do for every single layer that we add in here. So let's start by going, back to size sample 01. We're going to change the load method to add to new layer. And we're going to go ahead and drop that in. And now you'll see in the samples window, starts by the channel window, we're going to go into the samples window, that we have 2 layers. We have layer 1 and layer 2, and they both contain that same sample. So layer 1 is already set to a sample loop forward and the hold mode. And let's see here. Layer 2 is not looped, so we need to make sure that we click that to loop forward. And we'll also make sure that we have the mapping set the same on both layers. So root keys F0 here. Okay, and also on layer 2 in the sampler window, we're going to double click this gain so we can also set that to macro 8. We're going to do any macro assignments, we're going to make sure we do to every single layer. We'll open that up. We'll just make the maximum 0 to match the settings that we've already set up. We want to make sure that we've got these all the same so that all the layers will, go up and down in volume evenly. Now, I also like to set the attack and release to macros so that you can do, that amount of tweaking in real time. So we're going to go back to layer 1. We're going to double click on attack. We're going to assign that to macro 1. We'll go to layer 2. We'll double click on attack, macro controls, macro 1. Okay, then we're going to go back to layer 1 and do the same thing with the release time of the envelope. Okay, you'll see in a minute why I'm doing this, because it really allows us to sculpt the sound in different ways depending on what we'd like to use it for. So we'll double click on release. We'll go macro controls, and I'll choose macro 2. We'll go to layer 2, and I'll double click on release. We'll go to macro controls, and I'll choose macro 2 again. And now, you see if I turn the knobs up here, I've got complete control over the amplitude envelope, and I've got complete control over the release envelope, and we can really sculpt what this is doing. We can give it like a really long fade in. Let's see, turn that release way up. You know what I'm saying? Or we could like give it a really quick attack and a really, really quick release and have a really, really punchy sound. Hear that little snap back at the end. If we push the release time up just a little bit more, we can eliminate that. And one of the things you can do to where when you pull this back down, you know, we have it our release to be at minimum at 0 milliseconds at our minimum position. If you bring that up to like 3 milliseconds at the minimum position, maybe 4. Probably eliminate that sort of pullback, snappy sound. And you probably aren't going to need the, maximum release time to be 40 seconds long. I mean, maybe you would if you're doing really ambient music, but for, practical purposes, we're just probably not ever going to need it to be that long. So I might take the release time and take the maximum that it would ever go up to like 10 seconds, which is still like ridiculously long. And maybe we won't even do that. Let's see what it sounds like if we leave the attack real punchy, but leave that release real long. That's actually pretty nice. If we were to maybe turn this into a pad with like a bit of a softer attack here and a really long release. What let's do is change the polyphony from... Let's go back into the sample layer, make sure I get it on both. We'll change the polyphony from 1 to, say, 8. I find 8's a pretty good kind of a default for, like, pads and stuff. So, let's see here. 8. Yeah, see how we got that nice long... Yeah, I think... let's see here. We set that to... a maximum of 10 seconds. Fantastic. So we'll do that with every oscillator. And let's do kind of some adjustments with the attack as well. Let's see. I don't know why it's doubling this up. It's like kind of a glitch, it seems like. But let's see what we'll do here is we'll save what we're working on. This is going to be the saw layers test patch, we don't need to copy any samples right now. New session, saw layers test patch. Fantastic. Okay, so that's saved. Let's go ahead and close all this stuff out and just get a quick restart on Beatmaker 3 here. Get a little bit of a... There we go. Okay, cool. So let's do a open session. Was the saw layers test patch. And if we go back into the macros, okay, that seems to have fixed it. I experienced, quite a few anomalies and weirdness with Beatmaker 3 as well. I know a lot of you guys have, are posting on the forums that you're having, weird little anomalies that happen. It happens to me too. I just make sure that I'm saving all the time. And if stuff starts to look a little screwy or act a little weird, I just make sure that, I'm exiting Beatmaker 3, and typically a reboot, will fix most of my problems, as it did this time. We got lucky here. So, what we're doing is we want to adjust the settings of this attack macro. Like, we're not really going to need to have a, 20-second fade-in time. Let's start... maybe bring this up to like 2 seconds as the maximum attack time and see what happens here. Yeah, that's pretty nice. So for programming purposes, we'll turn both of these down just a bit. But you can see now, by, turning these, that you can get... really getting a lot of level. Let me fix that. Oh, I see, because I've got the volume knob up too high. There we go. Again, this is why I set the volume knob to a macro. Okay, let's go in here and let's pull the sustain down on these layers to like 80. Let's try 80. And this is going to make it so that when we hold the sound down as like a pad or something, that it's just not going to be quite as loud. I mean, you heard it was kind of distorting there for us a bit. And we'll make sure we use other tricks to keep that in line as well. Let's see here. So we set the sustain to 80, and let's do the same thing on layer 1. And so all of these little adjustments, we're going to want to make sure that we're doing to every layer as we go through and keep adding more layers to this. Cool. Let's see here. On layer 1, let's take the fine-tuning. Let's start with the left. Let's take this 5 to the, to the left. Whoops. And then on layer 2, let's take the fine-tuning plus 5. Okay, we've already got, a little bit more of a wider sound. That sort of detunes it a little bit. And let's see, rather not detunes it, but it rather spreads the tuning out from one oscillator to the other oscillator, so it spreads the tuning out between them per se, if that makes any sense. So let's go ahead and go back to our samples directory and these single cycles, and what we're looking for is size sample 01. Because I'd like to drag it in again. I'd like to change the load method from replace samples to add to new layer again, and we'll just drag that same sample in one more time. And now we've got 3 layers, and they all have the same sample on them. So first things first, we know that on the other 2 layers that we've assigned some macros, and let's do that same thing with the new layer we just added. So on the release, we'll assign that to macro 2. On the attack, we'll assign this to macro 1. And then we know that we brought the sustain down to 80%. 80, come on. Okay, and also we know that we assigned the gain to macro 8, so let's do that. And now, if we go back to the macros page and open up these tabs, we just need to make sure that all of these numbers are set the same. So for instance, we don't want, on this patch, we don't want this new layer to have a 20-second, maximum attack. We want it to be the same as the other layers. So we'll make sure that those numbers are all the same. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll make the minimum numbers and the maximum number is the same as we've already set to the existing 2 layers. Now, I think what's also important to keep in mind that every time we add another single cycle oscillator, another layer, we're essentially making the patch louder as well. So it's really good that we've got these assigned to the volume knob in case, we need to grab it and turn something down real quick. Okay, so 0 and 0, fantastic. And I'm going to change the gain to say volume instead. And we'll start maybe giving these some different colors so that it's, I don't know, visually different. I'm actually colorblind, so sometimes this takes a little bit of extra steps for me. And now that we've done some more stuff here as well, we'll go back to the save menu and make sure we get our save on. Okay, so what we've got is layer 1 and layer 2 slightly bit detuned in this fine tuning section, and then we've got layer 3 going straight up the middle and not being detuned from those other oscillators. Let's see what this sounds like. Oh, also let's make sure our polyphony on that 3rd layer equals the same. Now, if we wanted this to be like a mono lead sample that we were creating per se, we might, just leave this polyphony at just 1. We might even turn the legato on and get some glide time happening. But for now, I'm seeing if I can't create something a little bit more robust as like a synth or a pad. Okay, that's starting to sound pretty nice. You can hear how we're thickening up the sound by adding these additional layers, and we're widening the sound by changing this fine tuning on some of these layers. Let's get jiggy with it. Let's add 2 more layers and further spread our detuning about. Let's grab that size sample 01. Make sure our load method is set to add to new layer. We're going to drag this in 2 more times, okay? Now, we're up to 5 layers here. So let's do all the stuff we know we need to do. This is the housekeeping, right? The layers need to have the sustain set to 80. Whoops. To 80. Come on. Okay, and then layer 5 set to 80. Okay, and we know that the release on these macro controls is set to release. That's on layer 4 as well. And the same thing with the attack. Macro attack. And on layer 5, attack, macro attack. Okay, and also the gain, volume, and also the polyphony set to 8. And on layer 5. Polyphony 8, gain. Okay, polyphony 8 and gain. Macro controls volume. Okay, and then if we go back to our tab, we can click up in these 3 dots again and make sure that all these numbers are the same for all 5 of our layers. And you might think this gets a little intense when you start adding all these different layers and stuff. And it does. I mean, there's a lot to keep track of. You know, some of the synths that I program, like Avenger from Vengeance Sound, that's like an 8-layer synth. You have a possible 8 layers that you can work with. So you can, I mean, sound design goes pretty deep, you guys. Let's see here. Let's make all of these the exact same as well. And we'll make these minimums the same. It's all about attention to detail to get this stuff sounding good. Let's make sure that we have these the same. Okay, 0 and 0. Okay, just double check that I got everything there. Okay, fantastic. And so okay, so what let's do is let's make sure that all of our layers are have the sample on looped, because I believe some of them don't yet. So let's see here. We'll go back to we'll go back to our sample layers. We'll start with layer 5. And in fact it wasn't, so we'll set to loop forward, and layer 4 we'll set to loop forward, and layer 3 we'll set to loop forward. Remember how I said it's all about the details? I mean, it's really all about the details, and it's really about double excuse me, about double, let me get a little sip of coffee here. It's really about double checking your work often, you know, when you're sound designing, because this stuff gets really technical. Okay, so now I'm gonna, let's see here, we'll go to the mapping page. We're gonna make sure that all 3 of our layers are set to, what was it, I believe F0. Okay, F0 for layer 3, and for layer 4. Now, if we wanted to, let's see here, this is layer 4. So if we set this to F minus 1 instead of F0, same with layer 5 here, F minus 1. What we've done is we've essentially brought layer 4 and layer 5 1 octave lower than the rest of the layers. So now every time I hit one note, it's really hitting 2 octaves. this is definitely giving us a more interesting sound. Let's go, and then thicker sound. So let's go back to layer 4 here, and let's remember that on layer 1, I did the fine tuning 5 to the left, and on layer 2, we did it 5 to the right. So let's take layer 4 and let's spread this out even further. Let's go 20 to the left. Whoops. And on layer 5, let's go 20 to the right. Okay, now this is going to spread the tuning of these layers out even further. It's pretty nice. Let's make it maybe not as dramatic, and let's make it 10 instead of 20. So we definitely want it further out than those first 2 layers. Otherwise, it's just, building the thicker layers of the same. Yeah, that's starting to sound pretty nice, guys. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, you might have seen some of my other sound design videos in Beatmaker 3 where I like to assign a little bit of a pitch wobble to this fine tuning. And now that we've got this a really main element of our patch, spreading our layers out, it might be a really interesting idea to modulate this and to have the amount of modulation be adjustable in real time with a macro. And I've done this before, but not on a patch this robust. So let's check it out, guys. We're going to double tap on, we're going to start with layer 1, and we'll double tap on that fine tuning. We're going to modulate this with an LFO. There isn't an LFO in our patch yet, so we'll choose a new LFO. And if we go to the modulations page, here is that LFO that we've just added. I like to, for the pitch wobble effect that I'm going for, I like to sync this to my project's tempo. That'll change depending on what tempo you're working at, but having it sync means it'll always kind of sync up with your project. And for pitch wobble, I personally like to use the about 1/8 notes most of the time. And let's see here, if we bring this up to 100%, and with this amount knob over here is now going to control the amount of how much wobble we're actually getting on that knob. So let's see here, if I double tap this amount, and if I click macro and I assign this to the next available macro 3, okay, now if I go over here and name this pitch wobble, okay, and we repeat this step for all of the layers, then you'll see what I mean. Let's see here. Okay, so stick with me for a second here. So layer 2, we're going to double click on this fine tuning, and we're going to modulate that with an LFO, new LFO. Okay, we go to modulations. Okay, this is on layer 2. We're going to set the LFO to 100% maximum. We're going to sync this to 1/8, and we're going to double click this amount knob. Click on macro, click on pitch wobble. And now we're going to do this for the rest of the 3 layers. So on the layer 3, okay, we're back to the sampler window. We're going to double click on fine tuning. We're going to modulate with an LFO. We're going to need a new LFO because we're on a new layer. We'll go to the modulations tab. We'll turn our LFO to maximum percent, 100%. We're going to sync it. We're going to turn it up to 1/8. We're going to double click on that amount and turn that, assign that macro to pitch wobble. 2 more times, guys. We're going to go to layer. We're going to go to sampler. Double click fine tuning, macro controls. Nope, sorry about that. Let's go back a step. Double click fine tuning, modulate that with an LFO. We'll need to add a new LFO because we're on a different layer. We'll go to modulations on this layer, turn that LFO to 100%, sync it, turn it to 1/8, double click the amount, and set that to this macro. Okay, one more time. Layer 5 on the sampler, double click fine tuning, right? Modulate that with an LFO. It's a new layer, so it's a new LFO. On the modulations tab, we'll turn this LFO to 100%. We'll sync it. Going to go to 1/8. Double click the amount. Put that on macro controls. Put that to pitch wobble macro. And here we've assigned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different layers to that pitch wobble. And I'm going to leave this one as a full dynamic range of no pitch wobble up to what should potentially be a ridiculous amount of pitch wobble. Let's save all the work that we've done. Save. And let's test out that pitch wobble. Back to this so you can see where I'm turning that up or not. I really like having this sort of a thing built in. I know a lot of people are really into like this wonky down-tempo Boards of Canada, kind of drippy old VHS kind of textury sound. And you can really get that by using this pitch wobble effect and changing maybe a little bit less dramatic. Let's try 60%. Now it's just really subtle in there. Let's try 50%. It's kind of synth wavy, chilly, drifting about. Okay, let's add some effects to this sound. All right, those of you who know me know I'm all about the delay. Let's go ahead and start with an EQ. We'll put my default EQ here, which is going to just basically shave off anything. It's a high-pass filter that's set to 28 hertz, just in case there's any sub-frequencies coming through. But in fact, for this particular patch, we're not really going to need any super low frequencies coming through, so we'll maybe set that high-pass roll-off to about 70 hertz. Let's also go ahead and save our project again, and let's give this bank a name. Let's save the bank. We'll give this bank a name of let's call this portals. That looks cool. Portals. Okay, cool. Whatever. Let's see. Good deal. Okay, so on the effects tab, okay, let's add the stereo delay that's built into Beatmaker 3. And let's see here, we'll turn our high pass cutoff up to 600. This is pretty much my default on that, and maybe a little less. And we'll bring this low pass cutoff just down just a touch. I like to set the left channel and the right channel to different sync times, and I definitely like the triplets and the dotted delays and stuff. Let's try an 1/8 dotted note delay on the left channel, and let's try a 1/4 dotted note delay on the right channel. And I like to also, give these to further help the stereo separation. I like to give them a different amount of feedback, so we'll have a different, like a longer feedback on the right channel than on the left channel. And then these are locked together, your left and right dry wet mix of the delay. And let's double click this and assign that to a macro control. Let's give a macro 4 here. It says wet mix, we'll call this delay dry wet. Okay, and let's give that like a color, and we don't want this to go up all the way, maybe 50%, and maybe by default we leave this on like just a little bit to like maybe 10%. Let's try that. Okay, so if I bring macro 4 all the way up here, let's test it out with some like a short attack and release so we can really hear what the delay is doing. Cool. Let's change this to maybe. Let's make it so that the maximum is a little bit wetter than that even. Let's try 75% and... that's sounding really nice. Okay, let's put this back to more of a pad sound with like maybe 20% attack and like quite a bit of release again, 65. Nice. Okay. Let's see here. What else could we do? We've got 5 layers. We've got some delay on here. Let's get our save on again. And if we go back to the effects tab, we'll add an effect. And let's add an inverb onto this as well. And let's double tap that mix. Put that on a macro as well. Macro 5. Says mix, so we'll change that, rename to reverb. Okay, and let's maybe make the maximum like 50%, maybe a tiny little bit by default, right? 10. And we'll go into the reverb settings here. Turn that early mix up, maybe this density down. Maybe make a pretty big reverb. That's really nice. Yeah, that's really nice. Okay, let's see here. What else could we do? Let's turn that reverb down by default. Okay, give me a second. I'll figure out something else we can do. I really like to build a filter into my patches so that I can, filter stuff like a low-pass filter, so I can filter stuff up and down when I'm, jamming. Let's see here. How would we go about that? Let's start with layer 1. We'll go back to the sampler, right? And on the effects tab, let's add a filter. Okay, low pass, good deal. Let's bring that resonance down to say 45. And let's put this at the very top of the effects chain so that it happens before the reverb and before the delay. And we'll click the 3 dots next to the name there, and we'll click move up. We'll go back to the filter, and we'll click those dots, and we'll click move up. And we'll do that one more time so that it's the very first thing in our chain, right? And then we'll double click on the cutoff frequency and we'll assign this to a macro. We've got 2 left here in our first 8, which I like to fill up the first 8 in every patch that I program. I mean, take the time to do that. And here we've got cutoff. And let's see here. Probably don't want this to go down super low. I find that like 300 hertz is probably about as low as I like to go for the most part, unless you want to be able to filter that sound all the way out in the mix. But let's see, it's macro 6. But I find typically that at about 300 hertz, that it gets the sound into like a really dark, delicious dubby place where you can, still hear the sound when you filter it all the way down so that you don't have to worry you're going to over filter it down. Whereas if you left that to 0, and filter it all the way down, you can't even really hear it. You filtered the sound completely down, So I really find that 300 for me personally is a pretty good place to be here. Yeah, you know what I mean? So imagine what you could do, guys. What we downloaded to start this off was my pack of 100 free single cycle oscillators. Imagine the mathematical possibilities of what you could do here as you say if we layered 5 different oscillators with with each other, etc., or layer 10 or 20, as many as Beatmaker can handle, really. Let's save. And let's see here. We still have another macro available. Okay, let's try something I haven't done before in Beatmaker 3, which is let's see if we can create some sort of a wyden effect. Okay, and what we're going to do is we'll go back to our samples tab here. Okay, and on layer 1, okay, we'll start with layer 1. We're going to double click the panning, and we're going to choose macro controls. We're going to put this on macro 7. And then on layer 2, now I'm choosing layer 1 and 2 because I've got the fine tuning pushed left, and then on layer 2 the fine tuning pushed right. Okay, so we're going to double click panning, macro, okay, and we're going to go macro 7. Now we go back to our macros tab. Okay, and we're going to set these minimum results. Now what I want is, at minimum, I want it to be, 0, like nothing's happening, right? But I want, when we turn the knob, I want it to spread these sounds out. Okay, so let's see here. Pad 1, I detuned a little bit to the left. So when you turn the knob, it's gonna pan this sound to the left. And the same thing with layer 2. When we turn the knob, it's gonna pan that sound to the right, and hopefully create a bit of a wider sound in doing so. And let's test out this theory. Bring the filter up and try this out. Yep, it definitely has control over the stereo spread here. So we're going to rename this, instead of pan, we're going to rename this wyden, because really what we're doing is, as we, turn this, we're just pushing these sounds further out to the sides. And let's do this same sort of thing with layers 4 and 5 as well, but in a more subtle way. We're going to go layer 4, we'll double click on pan, go to macro, we'll put that on the wyden. Let me go to layer 5, we're going to double click on pan. We're going to put this macro on the wyden, okay? Then we're going to go back over to our macros page, and we'll click those 3 dots to get our window open here so we can set this. And we'll set this the same. Say minimum of 0. But when we turn the knob, we'll pan these 30% out to the sides, so that we have a really good control over how wide this sound is now with this knob here. So that's set to, let's go like maximum width. Let's turn that pitch wobble up so we can really hear it, right? Let's like max, like, well, not max, but let's crank that release up. Let's get that attack a little bit softer. Let's turn that reverb way up to like 70, and just put this 4. Let's turn this dry wet way up to like 70. Okay.